listening to Exposed Living Be Ageless, the podcast where we drop the masks, flip the script, and talk real life, real love, and real leadership unfiltered. I'm Stacey Van Thune, coach, speaker, entrepreneur, and founder of the Exposed Living movement that's redefining what it means to live, lead, and grow at any age. We talk identity, reinvention, belief, and freedom from the bedroom to the boardroom. Yes, we go there. This is not about staying young. This is about waking up. So if you're done with the shoulds and craving more fun, more freedom, more truth, more you, then grab your favorite drink, your bestie, maybe your journal. It's time. Let's get exposed.
Gen X, we were taught to be strong, to push through, to keep going, to handle it. But what we were never taught was how to grieve, not just death, but loss. Loss of love, loss of identity, loss of safety, loss of the life we thought we'd be living by now. So we kept going. We shoved it down. We put layers on top of it. We became lone wolves, and we called that resilience. But here's the exposed truth. Avoidance doesn't make you strong. It makes the grief louder later. Today's conversation is one all about grief. It's a conversation many people are afraid to have, especially at this time of the year. My guest today, Angie Easley. Did I pronounce that right, Angie?
Yeah.
Perfect. Knows grief intimately. After losing her first husband in a tragic plane crash, she didn't just survive loss, she was changed by it. And instead of letting that loss consume her, she chose to let it redefine her. This episode is about grief, yes, but more than that, it's about love after loss, identity after devastation, and what real resiliency looks for us as Gen X. So with that, I would love to welcome Angie to the show today, because grief isn't weak, vulnerability isn't failure, and choosing again is not betrayal. Thanks for joining us.
No, thanks for having me.
I'm excited for this conversation. You and I were chatting a little bit earlier and just saying how as Gen X, so many times we were just told to continue on, to be strong. And it was almost like when we showed vulnerability, it was a sign of weakness.
Yes.
And yet you were hit with one of the greatest loss to grieve, which was the loss of your own first husband. Can you share with us a little bit of the story? And then let's dive into how we can help other Gen X people identify and overcome grief.
Sure. So I was 25, and my husband, Kyle, actually worked for Circuit City. And he was on a trip with, he was flying on the corporate jet. And, it was interesting how it all kind of unfolded now that I think about it. I actually had a premonition that it was going to happen, and I asked him not to go. And of course, he was very, very career oriented and driven and just was trying to move up that ladder. And he thought I was crazy. So the conversation didn't really go that far. I think he brought that home to me in December of 2004. So then I just asked him the day before, please don't go again. And he's like, Ange, that will never happen. It's going to be okay. And that night I actually went and cut his alarm off so he wouldn't wake up. But I felt so guilty that I cut it back on. And so very, very long story short, I get a call at work the next day, and it was someone on the other end telling me that a plane crashed and there were no survivors. So that was in February of 2005. So he, I remember it like it was just yesterday, but then again, I don't remember it, everything surrounding that. I don't know. I don't, what else, I don't know. Would you else want me to dive into with that? There's just so much with
Well,
it.
let's go into a question. I mean, so here you are, a young woman starting her fresh life off with someone. I think a lot of us Gen X people, I always say we were taught, to find this person to make you whole, to create this life, and then all of a sudden you find yourself alone. And what's the first thing maybe you told yourself you needed to do in order to survive?
I didn't think I would survive, to be honest. Just to start with that, he truly was. I went straight from graduating college where my parents took care of me to then I got married. I had just turned 22. I got married in 2001 and I was a baby. And so we moved away from our families for this job for him. And he literally was the one who took care of me. I didn't even pay bills. I didn't do any of the sort. So when that happened, I really truly thought in order to survive, I was going to have to sell everything that I had and move back with my parents. I just didn't understand the depth of all the financials and the way that things worked because I'd never really had to do it, you know? So I thought I was going to have to lean on my parents. That's probably the first thing that I thought was in order to survive, I was going to have to lean on my parents and just figure it out. That ended up not being the case at all. I definitely, moment by moment, is how I lived. There was no other way for me to live.
I was thinking about this as you were explaining that I don't think it's an anomaly whether you're in your 20s or some people losing their partners in their 30s, 40s, 50s, that we all kind of take these roles within the relationship. And, how few, I think there's even stats of women that they don't actually understand the finances as the
Mhm.
men's handled it or vice versa.
Yep.
But really around, when you lose somebody, all of these things that you were never concerned about. I didn't lose a partner through death, but even through divorce,
Yeah.
that all of a sudden all these like jobs that were never mine become mine,
Yours.
right? And where do they sort out and
Yeah.
just feeling that overwhelm? So I'm curious, you said moment by moment. How did you start to learn the process then of how to start to rebuild and in the process of rebuilding overcome this grief that you must have been feeling?
Um, my family was huge in all of this. They helped me through every step that I needed to as far as, you know, my house and how to like be on my own basically. Um they helped me with that aspect of it in order to get, kind of a grasp of the things that I needed to do. Um, Moment by moment, I would say was I had to allow them, other people, to just do all the things for me and then tell me about it because I physically could not. Um, it- I would be in the closet crying, or I don't know how long I went through that type of thing. I did know right away that I needed to sell my house because I couldn't stay there anymore. I just, there are a lot of people that when they go through that, they find comfort in that. I didn't.
Yeah.
I felt like it was a horrible place to be because he wasn't there and I needed to get out quick. Um, so I think every single day, every single moment is I couldn't think past that. I couldn't, and then I would see what would be handed to me the next day. And just because of the nature of his death, that took a really, really long time, a really long time to kind of go through and to even have any services. The plane crashed in Colorado, so you can imagine that there were lots of things that had to take place before anything could really move or go forward. So it it was many, many months of just day by day. I think I took like a month off of work or more maybe. Um, and then when I did go back, I'm a teacher. I don't know that I really was there. So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it's awesome. As you're thinking this, growing up when I was in grade, it's not to the extent, but in grade 10, I lost my best friend in a car crash. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
remember this tragedy that I started like replaying every single last moment with him. And, you know, when I never got a chance to say goodbye, you know, and when I was younger, though, I had a friend that passed from leukemia. And I remember the difference in those feelings
Mhm.
because one, I got to say goodbye. I got to see him going through this challenging time that when it came for his passing, it was like, oh, give you peace, you know? And then the other one, I just never felt this level of peace. And, you know, as you're describing, I'm wondering initially if your grief was more exactly like we were taught, you know, just keep kind of moving on. You can take a month off school, but you
Mhm.
go here, but you're processing this a lot of like, how do I you know, you said you didn't even know if you survived, but how do I even start to vision a new life or like, what does this look like for me?
I didn't think it looked like anything. Like, truly.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I thought that was my entire world, and
right.
that I couldn't even be without him. Like, if I'm being honest, there were so many moments that I wanted to die. I didn't want anything without him, because that was the life I had pictured for so long. And so, you know, I didn't. I didn't know how. It was just, as I said, day by day, I just kept living because that is what I had to do. And I don't know if I lived, and people talk about this too. Well, how did you grieve? And, you shouldn't do these things and you shouldn't do these things this early. And, you know, I had so many things coming at me, all the stages of grief, where I should be at this point and this point. I was in the anger phase for a long time. So I think that it just evolved as the days kept passing. I've never really sat and actually thought about that before. Um, but I believe that just every day I chose to live. Like, I chose to live and be and to figure it out. Um, and then the people along my journey helped, or they were there to show me what I didn't want in my life, or how I didn't want it to be, how I didn't want it to resemble what I had. I kind of ran from a lot of the things that I had in my life then, and I wanted something completely different.
You know, I'm curious, did you ever feel this sense of guilt after the passing of Kyle? Like, as far as laughing again, when you chose to love again, those types of things?
Yes, I still live with the guilt, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I
I mean, it
did.
is exposed, so we would have you to be nothing but raw.
Um, I I felt number one, I felt guilty that I was alive and he wasn't. He was such a good human, and I had so much faith in him, and he was so loved by so many people that I truly felt that it should have been me and not him. Um, I felt, I felt, I felt, I was angry at him because he didn't listen to me when I asked him not to go. But then I felt guilty because I should have just kept the alarm off. So I felt guilt there. There are some things that I never truly, like selling my house, I didn't feel guilty with that because it was what I knew I needed for me. So I didn't feel guilty with that. And then, you know, moving moving forward and trying to continue to live, which I knew included I was not going to be alone. I didn't want to be alone the rest of my life. I knew that I wanted a family. And so I knew that that was going to come down the road. And so when I dated some, and then I met my current husband, Trey, and I did feel guilty. I would talk and talk and talk to Kyle like he was my God, and just tell me if this is right. Tell me if this is what you envision for my life. I just needed some sort of guidance because I'm just going on a whim. And I reconnected with this guy that I knew from middle school. And you don't know if I thought that Kyle was the one. I thought that he was my forever. And, they always, how everybody, they have one. Well, I totally don't believe in that anymore. And so then when I met Trey, yes, I felt guilty because I thought Kyle was the one. But then I have to go back and I had to tell myself, but he is not here. He is not here anymore. And I thankfully did have so many people in my life that would say, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to find that again. And so it took a lot of trust in that and me believing that and coaching myself to get to that point. I did make a lot of rash decisions. I'm not going to lie about that. When you are grieving like that, you just kind of go and you do. It was right for me. It was what I needed to do to live my life. When I met Trey, we did a lot of vacations, before we were married, and all these things that I had never done. I did a lot of things that I had never done. So yes, I do have guilt. I still feel guilty to this day, and in February it will be 21 years. I don't think that it's the same type of guilt that I feel when it first happened, in those early years. Because I am blessed and I am glad that I have the life that I have now. I wouldn't have my two beautiful girls, and so I try to frame it in that way, not I'm living and he's not, or I asked him not to go and I didn't do enough to make sure he didn't get on that plane. I try really hard to not go down that path because it kept me in a really dark place.
It's interesting. Like, thank you for being so vulnerable because I don't think you're alone. I think we we're over certain things and then again just kind of squash it down, but really starting to look at what were the positive things that he did bring to my life or what was the impact that he did have. And really when you think about this, you're 22 years old, you were a baby, even starting to know your own self, let alone having to go through, such loss.
Oh, I thought he was my identity, like
Yeah.
100%. This was a man that was moving up the corporate ladder that people thought so highly of. And I was just his wife. And, I was a music teacher and I was totally happy doing that. But I felt that was who I was. I was Kyle's wife. And so, you talked about the identity. That was hard because I didn't really see myself as being anything grand, And so I did have to, and I really feel that my identity has shifted a whole lot, many, many times throughout these past 21 years. I mean, a lot. It's just been, go ahead.
No, and I want you to explore it or
Okay.
explain and go kind of into that, please.
Yes. Well, it shifted first that I will never rely on a man. That's kind of where it went for me. I realized that I did rely heavily on, my parents first and then Kyle. And I didn't like the way it made me feel when that was gone. And I told myself I will never do that again. I will figure out my life and what I need, and I will figure out the finances, and I will be able to do it all on my own, and have that. So I felt this is Angie being the super adult that I am now, and not having to depend on anyone, that I can just do it on my own. Granted, a lot of people helped me to get to that point, right? And then when I moved to Northern Virginia and I got married to Trey, he and I both had this conversation that just said, we will always have kind of like our separate lives, but we'll put them together. We said we always want to have our friends, our own friends, and we want to be who we are as individuals. Because he was nearly 30 before he got married to me, and I'm his first wife. So he lived a lot of life and knew exactly who he was and who he wanted to be and what he wanted. And so we kind of came together really through tragedy, actually, because his mom died when he was young too. And so we had said that we would have these separate things, but then put them together. But because we were older, we decided to start our family, and we had our first baby girl within a year of being married. But then I kind of, I went through this phase of having both of my girls. So that was kind of my identity. But then I threw myself into my work, and I was a high school choral director, and I did so much. I felt this is who I am. It wasn't a wife. It wasn't really a mother at that point. I was a mother, but it was work. I taught in demographics that had children that needed people. They really needed someone to be there for them. And so I kind of became like a mom to these kids. And I threw myself into those kids at school and trying to help them. And that was who I was at that point. So that shifted, new wife, mom, into my career. And I still was lacking. In all of these things. Not once did I ever really do anything about my grief. Did I ever, I went to counseling right after Kyle died, and she was great, and she made everything okay for me in at that time. But then because I did move forward, I was like, this is what I'm doing. I'm living my life. I'm recreating my life, and it's just bam, 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 bam. And before I knew it, I'm sitting here with an amazing life, right? I have a great husband. I have 2 beautiful daughters. I have a great career. I just didn't feel like it was enough for me. But I couldn't pinpoint it. And so I tried therapy again. I've tried all the things, hypnotherapy. I've tried EMDR. I just wasn't, I couldn't talk about it. Like, can you, if they would sit there and tell me, let's talk about what's bothering you. Well, I don't want to talk about that anymore. We all know what has bothered me. We all know what has happened. How am I going to continue to move forward even further with this? Because I think I jammed so much in, because I was like, I just got to keep going. I got to keep living. I got to keep doing the thing. And I didn't ever, I can't even think of the word. I didn't think about the grief. It just lived in me.
Yeah. Like, it just becomes part of like who you are, almost as part of an identity piece in that, right? Like,
Yes.
I know
It,
that
I
this is
literally,
happening.
yes. And I
Is it
thought,
trusting yourself?
what?
Is there an element of like how to trust my own self to be okay, like without all of these things, so to speak?
Yes.
Or yeah.
Yes. I literally have felt for so many years, and even to this day, I feel it. I live 2 separate lives. That's hard. That is hard to carry every day. It wasn't even until my oldest daughter turned, I don't even know how old she was. She was probably 11. She didn't even know about that part of my life.
Oh,
Didn't even know. And she found out on a whim. We were at my parents' house, and she said, she came out in some wedding shoes, and I looked at my mom and I was like, oh, are those from my first wedding or my second? And Adeline looks at me and she's like, what are you talking about, mommy? I know. So that's how she found out. And I felt a huge weight lifted after I had that conversation with her. But then I was still with my younger one, because they're 3 years apart. I still felt like I had this weight, because They didn't know, but this is a whole other part of their mom. But I didn't feel, and it's not that Trey ever asked me to not. I openly would talk about everything with him. He knew everything. When I moved to Northern Virginia with him, I moved stuff that I still had of Kyle's. Like, this was open conversations. There was nothing. He knew he was marrying a widow. But then eventually I decided that I needed to tell Corinne, my younger daughter, and she's like, "Does Daddy know?" I was like, "Yeah, he knows." But at that moment, I was like, "Oh, like, my family knows," because before I had just been living this person, that they didn't know fully about. I think that was the moment that I realized, Angie, you have not dealt with this. I think that I thought I was doing the right thing by, I found the love. I found a great person. Like I always say, I'm so lucky that I have found two amazing men, because I truly have, but then again, I feel guilty about that too, because there are some people that don't ever find that. And I was lucky enough to find it twice. These are all thoughts that just live constantly in my brain. And so at that moment when I finally had said, "Oh my gosh, like, my girls know my secrets." That's how I looked at it. They know my secrets. They know this other life that I had. I realized what I was doing was not healthy. I thought I was dealing with my grief because I talked about him. Most everybody knew my story, but not to the depth that I think that it needed to be. And I was like, you have to take this a step further. You have to, and I don't know that at that point it was not therapy for me. It was not going to sit and talk to somebody. This was me just internally dealing with it, and starting to be able to tell my story more. And so I think another identity shift happened during all of that. And I needed to have purpose out of my pain. And that's when I started to realize that I do have something really amazing. I can help other people. I need to be a testament to my kids. And, and you were talking about the resilience, like this is resilience. And so that was, I think, my last identity shift.
For the time.
For the time. Yeah, there may be more.
Angie, if someone is listening, who's listening to this, is in the thick of loss right now, what do you want them to know is still possible?
Joy. I think I'm gonna get upset. I think for so many years, I knew the things that I wanted in my life, and I had to just keep pushing and moving forward. But I don't think that I had joy. I think I was just living. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I have a great husband. I have beautiful children." There are so many moments of that time that I don't even remember. I don't remember. There are many years of my life I don't remember. And I know that this is trauma's way of healing and protecting you. I get that. But for someone that just lost literally their entire world, I felt that I should have cherished things a little bit more. Do I regret anything? No. I do not, because I was doing the best that I could with what I had. But as I've grown older, I do love harder. I do love deeper, and I do cherish even the smallest things, because it literally can be gone the next day. So I would tell any person in the thick of, it doesn't even have to be another person who's lost their spouse, that you've lost anyone. It is okay for you to feel joy. It is okay for you to have moments of happiness and not be stuck. I think I was stuck for so long in the grief, and that I still needed to be grieving and be upset, because that's who I'd become. I became the widow. And I just didn't allow myself to heal. I truly believe I did not allow myself to heal, because I thought that I needed to be stuck there because for whatever reason that paid respect to him, which is so broken, so broken. So I always say you lived, I mean, like I told you, I lived moment by moment. I never knew what was going to be happening, how I was going to feel from minute to minute. And you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay and allow grace. And just to be able to feel that joy and happiness when it comes, because I don't think I did.
So powerful, Angie. Is it goes to like having that belief and faith. It's interesting because I've been talking about this lots in leadership, but around so many of us need that evidence before we believe,
Mhm.
but yet belief precedes evidence. And yet so many times we get locked in the beliefs that has gotten us our current result, not the one that we truly want. So to lean into is what I'm hearing is that you're worthy of the happiness that you desire, that you're worthy of that joy. But in order for you to really experience it, you also have to believe it and kind of identify what needs to let go, forgive yourself
Yeah.
in order to create this space almost to receive it.
Yes. Yes, you do. I was hanging on for so long to something that just wasn't. It was never going to be anymore. But I wanted it so, 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 so badly, because that was the life that I had planned. So yeah, you're dead on with that. I knew that I was still here for a reason. I knew that this had to have happened for, whatever reason it did. But I wasn't ready to believe that I deserved that, or that that I can actually smile and laugh. It's the very, very small things. Yeah, the belief definitely did not come quick.
For sharing the story because I think so many people need to do it. And even the perception that you said of almost like, you know, I think a lot of us do get trapped, like he couldn't live. And so then I feel indebted for it. But versus a perception of like, let me live so big that
Hmm.
it like represents the spirit that he had. And by not living full out is honestly one of the things that, it's almost a disservice because they didn't get to do it. Like,
Yes.
okay, right?
Yes. But in our brains and the brokenness that
Yeah.
we are, we can't see that. We cannot and I would always, will do the things that would make him happy. Like that's not how
Right.
I thought, that just made me cry.
Right.
So, yeah, I just think that you feel so alone and broken, and that there's nothing to live for when you're, in the thick of it. And that's hard.
So one more then, what is a tip for someone potentially that's feeling this to be able to overcome that hard, like to start to see it as an easier way of living, not just for yourself, but the person or the thing that
Mhm.
you may be grieving?
Oh, um, I really think that you just have to feel what you feel. Like, if I'm being honest, I think I don't know. There's no book that tells you. Um, I think I held back on a lot of things, and I would say that you just have to go for it. You have to just trust and give yourself the grace to. That's hard.
Is it almost like trust and give yourself the grace to believe that you can experience that joy
Yeah.
again?
And I know I'm living proof of it. I
Yeah.
know that. But for me to tell that And I when I talk to, like on my podcast, and I talk to these other widows, and it's amazing to see their perspective, because their perspective is a lot of the time not the same as what mine was. Now, there are a lot of
Right,
different things with I was 25. I was so
right.
young. And a lot of these widows that I have interviewed, they've been older and they lived a lot of life and they had many years. I only had barely 5 years with mine. And and so I I look at them and I'm in awe of the perspective that some of them have had. And I'm like, how on earth did you allow space for that so early, right? But I think a lot of it is because I was young and I hadn't experienced life, So I can't say that every woman or man or anyone who loses anybody would not feel those things that I felt. Maybe they do. I mean, I've had people that have lost their spouses, and they're only 6 months out and they're like, I really feel like I want to be with someone and date again. And I'm like, you need to. You need to. Because the fact of the matter is, they're not going to come back. They're not going to come back. You have to be the one that saves you and advocate for you and create that new life that you deserve.
So good. Angie, you and I have to chat more. There's so many different ways we go down this path. And
Oh,
I
I
know
know.
marriage and
We could do a
parenting.
whole
I
series.
often say that with divorce, right? Because
Yeah.
no two stories are
No.
the same. At the end, you're not together anymore.
Yes.
But how you got there is so
Yes.
individual. But I love, love, love how you said that with be an advocate for yourself. And I think that this is where we start to learn that it's our own responsibility to feel that peace, that it's not a person or a different thing, but to really sit in it, but then allow yourself to start trusting and believing more that, this too shall pass, even though it
Yes.
feels so heavy at the time.
Yeah, and there were, and like I told you before, I would like talk all the time to Kyle. Are you okay with what I'm doing in my life? Is like I wanted him to be the person that okayed what I was doing. And eventually I stopped doing that. Eventually I didn't need or feel that I needed to have his approval or recognition. And I think that was also another healing for me, that I wasn't always seeking something from him. Well, I know that, and people talk about signs and all these things, and I would think, oh, that's my sign. Yep, got to do it. And so eventually that subsided, and I didn't need that in my life anymore. And I knew I'm a big girl, and if this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing, then I'm going to figure it out. It might fail. It might not be the right thing, and that's okay. Um, I also had to not worry about what people thought a lot.
Yeah,
I that's
gosh.
that's another thing I would say. I was very, very, very aware of what people would think of me, how they would think that I was grieving, or if I was doing the wrong thing, or she did that too soon. I lived that for many, many, many years. And the moment that I decided, I don't care, it was so much better, so much better, because as we said, nobody grieves the same. Nobody's grief journey is going to be, the perfect one. And you have to do what you got to do for you. And so when I started to kind of push that out of my life, things got a lot better too. Yeah.
Sure. I have one final ages question for you because actually I might give you a couple. I have curious at this. What's one word your future self would thank you for choosing?
Grace.
And to you, what is resilience?
This finding purpose in my pain. Yep.
And maybe they're in the thick of it and want to reach out to you for some support. How can they get more Angie in their lives?
Oh my gosh. So my husband and I actually started a podcast called Resilience Reborn. So we're kind of on a hiatus right now, but we have a website, and my email is Angie@resiliencereborn.org. So they can find me that way. I'm on all social media platforms. I have a Resilience Reborn page, and then Angie Easley is my personal page. So they can reach me through any of those avenues.
Fantastic. I'll make sure that all of those are included in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining. I know we're going to reach out to Trey and get him on one day, and maybe the two of you both.
Well, that would be so good.
Learning in this sharing, right?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me, Stacy.
Oh, my pleasure. And for everyone that's listening, know that grief isn't something that you get over. Angie's story shows that today. And it's something more that we move through. And moving through doesn't make us weak. It makes us honest. It makes us human. And as Angie's story shows, it makes us brave. If this episode shifted something inside of you, especially during the holidays, we know that people feel different things during the holidays. Know that you're not alone, and to lean into it. Don't become that lone wolf, made to do life alone. And we're there for you. So make sure that you know that people like Angie are available, myself, and for Gen X, maybe the most disruptive thing we can do is stop avoiding the pain and start trusting that there is still so much life waiting for us on the other side. Thank you, friends. Until then, stay exposed. Cheers.
That's it for today's episode of Exposed Living, Be Ageless. But this is just the beginning. If this episode made you feel something, share it. Tag me. Send it to a friend. Let's start the conversation we can be having all along. No shame, no guilt. Unfiltered, raw, real, exposed. And if you're ready to go deeper, join us inside the Exposed Living Facebook community, where we take this work off the podcast and into real life. Know this, your change starts when your excuses die. Because this life, this one wild, ageless, unforgettable life is waiting on you. This is your time. This is your truth. This is Exposed Living.